Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Underwater Photography Show. As always, I'm Matthew Sullivan.
And I'm Alex Mustard.
And we haven't actually done one of these in a while, so today we have Inspirational Instagram number 11.
Whoa, 11. That is a good number. Excellent. So I'm going to pull up the pictures. Involves me fiddling with the screen. And our first image is an image sorry, there's something blocking my screen here, so I can't read who the picture's about. Here we go. It's by Photosub 70, and it's Mark Casanova's, as it says on the picture, of course. And it's a picture of a John Dory swimming by some old fishing line with buoys on it, with look like some squid eggs on it. But yeah, what a great fish.
Yeah. There's only one kind. Like John Dory is John Dory, right? There's not any different variations of them?
I certainly within Europe, which is where I've seen them. As far south in the Atlantic as the Canary Islands, and I've seen them all the way up to Scotland, and I've seen them in the Mediterranean as well. That area, they're all Zeus faber, the species. A very cool Latin name that it has. I have this little niggly feeling in my head that maybe there's a variety they see in Japan.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's the same or different.
And that's why I was curious, because, I mean, it's a whole ocean apart. So in theory, they could have gotten there somehow.
Yeah, I don't know much about them as a species.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from the encounters that I've had with them. Actually, I saw one. I saw the skeleton of one on the beach the other day, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I think probably quite a young one. And it was just rotted away to the skeleton, but yeah, probably caught by one of the fishermen. But yeah, off our local beach.
I mean, they're a really cool fish, and every time I see a picture of one, it pauses me because they don't have like an outrageously unusual shape, but the face is very unusual, and they have that big extending jaw, which is cool, and the spines and the pattern is all very cool as well, and having this one with the squid eggs, I think, balances the frame really well. Because if you just had the fish and it's angled out of the frame on that side of the frame, it would look a bit goofy, but balanced nicely. And then you get a little hint of the bait fish in the background, which is nice too.
Yeah, it gives a bit of depth to the composition.
Yeah.
With John Dory's, I always focus on that face. They've got such a great eye, such a cool, weird looking face, and they are almost such a two-dimensional fish. We quite often get them hanging around in seaweed forests. And they'll just turn face onto you and just disappear, because they line up so well with all the stringy weed coming up, particularly when they're younger and they're a little bit smaller. They're amazingly good at hiding like that. But yeah, because of that great face, I tend to always shoot them either as a close focus wide angle if you can get close enough to them around the face, but more typically as kind of a portrait, side-on portrait with a macro lens to really emphasize that face coming through in the picture. And I think that's why this picture works, because it's the former of those two. It's the close focus wide angle shot of the fish coming in close to the camera.
Are they generally pretty tolerant?
Variable, I would say. At night they can be a little bit more easy to approach, and I would say I've photographed them quite a lot at night, and I think you get to do a little bit better. I don't know that much about them, whether they are, the fact that I've seen them so often at night on night dives, and they do seem quite active at night, suggests to me that they are probably an active night hunter, but they're not a species I know much about. They are reasonably confiding, but I think they're one of those fish that if they note that you're kind of paying attention to them, because they're used to being camouflaged, if they note that you're paying attention to them, they become more wary. I think naturally they're quite approachable, but yeah, once they figure out you are focused on them, I think suddenly they go, okay, my cover's blown, I'm now going to move away. But again, it does vary a lot round. And I think particularly if you have them in areas where they see divers a lot, I suspect they're more confiding. Yeah. A lot of the places where I've bumped into them, it's just a random individual that you'll be happy to find. Okay, moving us on. I've got to find the right buttons. On to our next one, which is by K.Zhang, 1210. And it's a Blackwater photo. Oh, look, I'm wearing the right T-shirt for this.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And I'm guessing this is a juvenile pancake batfish or something like that, but I don't know. I don't know if you read the caption for this one.
It just said juvenile batfish.
Okay.
I think with those, when you have those larval ones, it's pretty hard to determine what they're actually going to end up being
Yeah.
until they start to take some sort of shape. But this, I've never seen a picture of. I've seen pictures of the larval pancake-ish batfish before, and they don't look anything like this one. This one has that crazy pattern, which I've never seen. They're usually pretty
Yeah.
bland, and perfect timing to catch the mouth open, both eyes, and the fins flared up around the backside like that. And I think he had a profile picture of this as well with the tendrils off the back of the tail, which was cool.
Oh, wow.
But a
Yeah,
really
difficult
nice
with
one.
the subject like that. I think that, to know which angle to go for. This one, you don't see the tendrils, all the filaments coming off the back, which, are really cool, and you'd love to have them in the picture. But I think that this face is so full of character, very impactful,
Yeah.
that I think this is a good choice compositionally.
Yeah, and it's rare that a blackwater shot stops me anymore because a lot of them kind of look the same. But once in a while, if you get a remarkable creature and you time the picture just perfectly, it still makes me stop and pause.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of people compare it to kind of pool photography. It's the first time you see kind of models in dresses in a black swimming pool. Those shots just wow you as an underwater photographer. And then when you see them a few times, you're like, they're kind of a bit repetitive. And I think visually Blackwater can sometimes be a little bit the same, and then someone comes along and does something a little bit different, and suddenly you get that same hit that you got when you first saw that genre of pictures. And I think this picture is very successful in that regard. Right, moving on to again, I can't read the name properly because there's something in the way, but Toranchi Kawana, and it's a picture from Lembe of a very young painted frogfish fishing. And a really handsome individual, I would say.
Yeah, that's why it stopped me. It's a beautiful, beautiful individual with all those little sponge apertures. Oops, sorry, I banged my desk. All over the body.
In excitement.
Yes, of course. And then getting the lure is perfect. And I know, like, we've talked a lot about subjects against black backgrounds is kind of cliche and it's easy to do. But every once in a while, I think it works out really nicely when you have the right subject to contrast against that. And I think this one is a good contrast to the black.
Yeah, and I think particularly when, you have an extraordinary looking subject,
Yeah.
there's no point being all fancy with the photography and then, almost distracting the viewer from enjoying the subject. There are times where you just go, this thing was super cool, and I'm going to show you how cool it was.
Yeah.
We actually had, it's quite unusual in Lembe to have the frogfish showing this really strong aperture pattern. Obviously, all the frogfish have apertures on, but I always sort of associate kind of this sort of look of frogfish, of painted frogfish, more with barley, where it's very common that the juvenile painted frogfish will have these really obvious apertures, sponge aperture markings all over them. In Lembe, it's less common, but we had one like this when I was there this year as well. And I wonder whether this is an earlier photo of the same individual that we had, because that one was very beautiful and, unusually had this same sort of patterning on it. But it was quite a bit bigger. But they grow very fast, frogfish, so it could well have been from this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, really cool. Yeah, and it had that same, orangey yellow color, sponge apertures, green eye. So yeah, very nice. Right, I'm going to roll us along to macro.michael. And a picture from Michael Martin from Talamban, and quite an extraordinary picture in my mind. I have seen lots of pictures of Harlequin shrimps. I've seen lots of Harlequin shrimps in the sea. I've never seen aggregation of Harlequin shrimps. They were always, in my mind, a species that lives in kind of they form stable pairs. And so you typically see them as pairs. You might get a young little one settling with a pair. But I've never seen a group gathering like this, and also to have them gathering in a sponge is such a similar color to them is amazing. So a really interesting find.
So when I first saw this, I was like, oh, he just composited a bunch of the same shrimp into the frame. And then a friend I talked to said that no, this is rare, but it happens where they'll aggregate. And then the more you look at it, you can tell that they're all their own shrimp. They're different sizes, different patterns, that kind of thing. But yeah, a really remarkable thing to see. I mean, I've only ever seen one Harlequin shrimp, and it was very small and mostly patternless. So seeing this would be crazy.
Michael's definitely seen more than one.
Yeah. And especially seeing one in a sponge like this is really, really cool. So it could just be one of those things where it's super unusual, but somebody has to photograph it at some point, and he was lucky enough to be the one to come across it. So yeah, I would love to know the science behind why they're all gathered like that. But I'm sure.
I mean, yeah, they don't look really big ones.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Maybe like a cluster of juveniles or something like that.
Yeah, but they don't look really tiny either, because the really small ones don't necessarily have such well developed of the big pincers. So it's very unusual. I would be fascinated to hear more. And it's actually kind of, to change the subject slightly, quite a little bit. When, as you know, it's that competition time of year, and as a competition judge, it's pictures like this that cause you a lot of interest and debate, because typically people tend to enter in contests the amazing things that they see. And you obviously can't just become, as a contest judge, go, oh gosh, everything's manipulated, everything, kick it out, we can't have that, blah, blah, blah. And, this picture doesn't feel like it's a manipulated image. But it's also, when you do see these extraordinary events, it does create some sort of, consternation for the judges to go, are we seeing something amazing that we need to reward, or are we seeing something dubious? And in this case, I very much feel it we're seeing something amazing. But because I've never seen it at all, or I've never seen another photo like this, it does, it is quite interesting in a judging room. And sometimes you will get a judging room, or particularly with an online contest, where everyone is just like, ooh, I'm too scared to vote for that. I don't want, just because I don't know what's going on, and therefore I'm not going to give any, I'm just going to stay away from it, because there are other amazing pictures I can go for, which I feel I can, nail my colors to that mast on.
Yep.
And so I just mentioned that as an interesting thing. And I think it's why it's valuable when the contests ask you to provide a bit of background information, or have space in the judging process for a judge to be able to go, oh, dear competition organizer, can you write to this photographer and ask them to tell us what's going on in this picture, because we'd like to award it, but we don't want to award it without having a bit more insight as to what they saw.
It's interesting too, because there's other, shrimps that'll aggregate like this, and you would think nothing of it. But just because we're so used to seeing pictures of harlequins as a pair or solo, that it's like, oh, but I'm sure there are aggregations of them for whatever reason. And it's just maybe that we don't know what those reasons are, that we're like, oh, you said there's a little bit of a niggle in the back of your head.
No, I wasn't casting any aspersion on this particular image, but it's just, I was sort of, telling people the sort of the nature of the way, contest judging rooms can work sometimes, where judges, are very, very careful not to want to award images that might be in some way manipulated. And therefore, when you see something remarkable and you haven't had personal experience of it, sometimes judges can be overly cautious. Okay.
Especially when it's a stuffed anteater that's been stolen out of a museum.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that one obviously passed all the judges, and then later on gets picked up. And it's anyway, it's not the time to talk about that one, but okay, moving on to one of my favorite photographers, who's always doing exceptional work and is always creating really interesting images, and this is a really beautiful image, and that's Brandon D. Cole on Instagram. And it's this picture here of all these green surf anemones with a fantastic reflection at the top of the frame. Creates a really graphically interesting and unusual frame. Really, really nice picture.
I'm partial to reflection images, whether they're underwater or topside. I don't entirely know why, but every single one of them will catch me. And I like that it's also interspersed with all the little gaps in the anemones are filled with starfish, which I think is pretty cool. And you get the blue.
It's a very nice picture, yeah.
And I believe it's from a tide pool in Oregon, if I recall correctly.
Okay, yeah, I was going to guess a little bit further north than that, but the ochre starfish, they still get reasonably far down south, don't they now, down to maybe Monterey.
I think Monterey is as far south as they go. But like Brandon's one of those photographers who does just really, really cool natural history images. He doesn't try to do anything fancy technique wise or anything like that. He's just out there so much, and he sees so much cool stuff, and he knows how to capture it nicely. And I think that's what he did really well here. And I know you and I have discussed this image a little bit offline too, and what you think can be done to improve it a bit.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that the tide pool is a really good choice in that, getting this level of stillness in the sea would be very, very difficult. And then in the sea, you're likely to be on scuba. So again, your own bubbles are gonna, ruin that reflection. So tide pool, either, it's a big tide pool and he's in the water with the snorkel on, or probably more likely he's lying on a rock next to the tide pool with a camera in the water. Yeah. And that has really made this image. I think in terms of improvement, I really like the composition, and I think that it looks to me like a shot with a fisheye, and I think he's managed the fisheye distortion really, really well. So I don't find any fisheye distortion ruining this shot, which in a off-center reflection shot you might get that effect, and I think he's managed all that really, really well in the composition. The anemones in the center frame are a bit bigger, but they're also a bit bigger in the bottom corners, which, again, I think doesn't make me feel like it's fisheye distortion. It's just different sizes and shapes of anemones as you go away from the surface. I find the lighting, particularly on the edges and the top parts of the picture, just a little bit bright relative to the center of the frame. And I would say, a little bit more time in the just evening up the exposure would really allow the pattern to speak for itself. At the moment, the composition is a mix between the intended composition and where your eyes go with the brightness. And I think a little bit of just brightening up in that center frame and darkening down where it's a little bit brighter, particularly in the top left corner, but also top right corner, would, just allow this pattern to come through. And then I think white balance wise as well, just a little tweak on that would also help separate the purple and the greens. It's an awesome photo. And it just could do with, like, for me, a final couple of tweaks, and it would but it's one of the most interesting underwater pictures I've seen for quite a while. I really like it.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, I'm going to roll us along another one. Underwater, and this one is by Underwater Paparazzi, and it's a photo of a load of salp chains.
Yeah, so there was a big salp bloom, I guess you would call it, in San Diego last month before. And so all the local divers were out there taking pictures of all these jelly-like salps. And there were a million pictures up there, so I figured I'd have to reshare one of them. And this one, I think, just gave a whole sense of the chaotic denseness of them, and they just keep going through the frame, disappear into the distance. And it's a shame that the visibility is so bad, because it'd be cool to see it go, further with all of the salps, but obviously limited by water conditions, and the salps are in large part to blame for that a little bit. And I assume they're also there feeding on all the stuff in the water.
Yeah. I really like the idea of the picture. This chaos, this madness of all these chains, I think looks fantastic. I think one thing I would probably like is, as I look deeper into the picture, I see some salp chains making nice curly shapes, because they often swim in spirals and curls, whereas all the ones in the foreground are a little bit straight. And I think that, and it's probably the case, I'm sure, that the photographer took a ton of pictures, and maybe I would look for another one in this sequence where the foreground salps are a little bit more interestingly arranged. I think that would be my only criticism of this one, in that I really like the idea, I really like the execution, I really like the feeling of the picture. Yeah, it's not the clearest waters, but it tells the story very well. But I see some lovely shapes, particularly in the middle of the picture. There's some lovely swirls and curls. I'd like, a shot where maybe the foreground ones are swirling and curling attractively, as to be the shot that was chosen to be processed, because I'm sure there were loads taken.
I think she did post a bunch.
Yeah. Maybe it's the one you chose out of the sequence that are on there. So,
my poor taste.
Yeah. No, I do really like it. I just was like, I see those lovely curls in the middle and would like to see some of those in the foreground. Okay. Again, telling you that Matthew put this selection together. We head up to Vancouver Island, where we've never been before, on Inspirational Instagram, to see a photo by innocent_eyes_underwater of a fish that even the regular viewers will be able to identify as a decorated warbonnet. These fish are rare in the sea, but very common on our YouTube channel.
And the rarity in the sea is why I keep showing them. I'm going to keep posting them here.
Oh, you get them coming in. Beautiful green eyes.
But yeah, I mean, they're a really cool fish. And I really like this portrait of it because you get to see a little bit of the surroundings. You get a little bit of the tube anemones and the tube worms. And then it's just such a good face. You have eye contact with both eyes. You have the crazy hair and the oversized lip filler lips. But it's such a cool fish. And this is one of my favorite pictures of one, just because there's some, you can anthropomorphize it a bit with the expression on its face, which I think is really cool. And it's hard to do with a fish sometimes, is to get that sort of.
Yeah, especially in these cold conditions, like because they're not easy to find. They're usually living in dark little holes, and then to create a really strong image like this is not easy. It's not. So yeah, it's. I was joking around before. It's very impressive work. So, okay, and I'm going to move us on to our final one, which is in much warmer waters, but no less impressive an image. And this is by Simon Lorenz _Insider Divers. And it's a picture of a mum humpback whale. But I think the focus of everyone's attention is this incredible marble white, completely white juvenile. And what I love about this photo is that it's not just, here's a cool whale, let's take a quick snapshot. It's a really well composed image and a really well exposed image. That white so easily be overexposed, and you can see all the detail on that young baby white humpback whale, which is fantastic. And also, it's the composition of placing it, moving alongside the female is really, really nice. You see it's the baby, you see how small it is compared to its mum. And just, really, really nice image. I think the underexposed background really helps make that little baby pop.
Yeah.
And it's just a really nice picture of a very, very cool animal. And for me, more interesting like this than if it was just the baby on its own in the blue.
Yeah, the contrast against the mother looks really, really cool, both for the size and obviously the color difference. And I would imagine you're probably going to get quite a few baby white whale pictures in UPY this year, because I know a bunch of people went and saw this. But I mean, it's one of those things, like, if you have the opportunity to, that's like the third or fourth white humpback ever. Like, if you have the opportunity to go see such a cool thing, why not take it and take as many pictures as possible? And I did see a lot of images of it, but like you said, a lot of the pictures I saw were just the baby whale, or the baby, which is really cool. It's a beautiful animal.
Yeah.
But when you see it contrasted against how they're supposed to look and the size of the mother, it works really well. And this is such like almost like the mom is keeping the baby, back by her tail, out of harm's way.
Yeah, it's almost got her arm back, isn't it? It's like, yeah.
So a really cool moment. And like you said, really well done to expose both the mother and not blow out the whites on the baby. And against the dark water works really nicely as well.
Yeah, it's super nice. Super nice. Right, that's our last one, I think. Yep. So I'm just going to pull us back up onto full screen. And with that, thank you all for watching. We'll be back again soon with another episode of the Underwater Photography Show.